Meghan Markle and Prince Harry share heartbreaking news, plus how Hollywood is responsible for a revival and interest in dramatic royal history. Hey guys, welcome back to another shared news from home. Today we're talking about the latest royal family updates. But before we get into it, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, I'm your host, Fiona Zaring, and I'm joined by the wonderful Gabby Gonta.
Hi, Fiona.
Hello. So, Gabby, let's just dive right in because we actually got some major news today from Meghan Markle herself in a powerful new essay that she wrote for the New York Times. She revealed that she suffered a miscarriage over the summer. In the very personal piece, she describes the difficulty of losing her second child and reflected on the hardships of the past year that we've all been experiencing. She also reflected on a moment that happened during one of their royal tours, an interview she gave where a reporter asked a very simple question. He asked her if she was okay.
And also thank you for asking, because not many people have asked if I'm okay, but it's a very real thing to be going through behind the scenes.
And their candid exchange made headlines around the world, which may seem shocking, but it really was sort of groundbreaking. And she talked about how that made an impact on her. And she wrote, "Sitting in a hospital bed, watching my husband's heartbreak as he tried to hold the shattered pieces of mine, I realized that the only way to begin to heal is to first ask, are you okay?" And that simple question sort of comes up a couple of times throughout the piece. She really emphasizes how important it is to just ask that and, check in with yourself, check in with the people you love. She also talked about how many women share in this grief all over the world, but how a lot of people feel like they cannot talk about it or grieve publicly. She wrote, quote, "Despite the staggering commonality of this pain, the conversation remains taboo, riddled with unwarranted shame and perpetuating a cycle of solitary mourning." Aside from personal loss, she talked about, as I said, those common struggles that we've all experienced in 2020, how important it is to be there for one another, and of course, the fight for progress and continuing to lift one another up. So it really is, you guys, if you haven't read it yet, a truly moving piece. Gabby, I'm curious on your thoughts. I mean, they have so many eyes from all over the world on them. How brave was it for her to come forward and, share her story like this?
It was so brave, and I think it's so important that she did it. Obviously, she's, still hurting from those moments that she described in the interview. And just the simple question, are you okay? That just really penetrated her soul and brought it all out there. And I think it's so great that she's emphasizing that because it is such a simple question. And we can all ask that to ourselves and to our friends and family and just check ourselves and try to realign ourselves as much as possible. But this is such a topic that for some reason is just not talked about, or seems like, you have to go through it alone. And I think it's great that she is talking about this because she's such a big name with star power and everyone, appreciates her and is looking toward her for how she handles situations like this. I think another one was Chrissy Teigen, who went through a similar issue earlier this year. And, she was saying the same things, like, we need to talk about this because this is painful. And when you're in the public eye, this is part of your life. So it's great that we're starting to have these conversations, especially from women that people really look up to and admire.
I absolutely agree with you. I remember when Chrissy published her essay, very similar to this, there was an outpouring of comments, tweets, Instagrams, you name it, from people relating, sharing similar stories. And sometimes when a powerful woman uses her platform to just share her story, it really can start such a domino effect of conversations being had. So totally think, as obviously heartbreaking as this news is, it was really wonderful for her to use her voice in this moment. And obviously, we hope the best for them moving forward. I think this is the start of such a new chapter for her and Harry, and I'm sure there are going to be wonderful highlights and high points to come. Aside from Meghan and Harry, who are typically, the two members of the royal family right now who get the most attention, there has been a lot of hot topics of discussion on the past, the recent history of the royal family, because the latest season of The Crown is out. And honestly, you guys, Prince Charles is in some hot water. A lot of people are not happy with him right at this moment. This season, if you haven't watched it, tackles his relationship with Princess Diana and is, reminding everyone or educating people who didn't know on some of the tragedies of Diana's life. If you haven't watched, this is no spoilers. This is public knowledge. This won't ruin the show for you. It's been out in the public for a long time. But in case you don't know, Charles and Diana did not have a happy marriage. Publicly, people knew it at the time, as years and years went on. It was pretty public knowledge that Charles continued to have affairs with his now wife, Camilla, throughout his time with Diana. A lot of people are realizing for the first time kind of what really went down during those days. And since we have all this extra time at home to binge shows, binge documentaries, people are really curious and educating themselves on this chapter of royal history. And it's leading to a lot of cries to hold Charles accountable for some of the not so cool things he did back in the day. It seems as though a lot of people took to Twitter to take their frustrations out, as people do, because Charles and Camilla have actually shut off their comments because their posts have been flooded with hate. So I think it's just really interesting how, like I said, this has not been a secret. This has been something we've all known for a long time. But The Crown is really powerful. They're an incredibly well done show. And I think it's really interesting how it stirred up this conversation. I mean, what are your thoughts on a television show being able to bring back to center stage royal history like this?
I think it makes a lot of sense. There's so many fans of The Crown. And like you said, we just have more time to be looking into moments like this. And I always thought, shows that are documentaries or docuseries or based on real life events are just that much more interesting because there is a history there. And all of these things really did happen. It might look a little bit more cinematic or planned out in the show, but overall, like, this really happened. So I think it does make people want to go back and check things and see how things were. And especially with the royal family, it's just such an interesting concept. And, obviously we don't have that in America, but in England, it's just a huge thing. It's part of their legacy. And those people there and in America and all over the world, like, they really look up to this family. And it's so crazy the things that go on behind the scenes versus what we see. So there's just so many layers to it. And that's why I think people are fascinated with it. And it's unfortunate, what Charles and Diana went through during those years, but I think it's topics that are more common to even talk about these days, like mental health or unhappy marriages and things that everybody deals with as humans, whether you're part of the royal family or not. So I think people are really connecting to these stories that have been around for a while.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's such a great point. I think that, I'm someone who considers myself, up to date on the royal family. I've always been interested, maybe more than even others. And I was shocked by a lot of the things that I learned watching the season, by a lot of the things that I went, wait, did that really happen? And so then you hop to Google, to look things up, to learn more information. And you are totally right. I think that when a lot of this stuff was going down, these were conversations that were just not had in the same way that, like, younger generations are comfortable talking about them. I hopped on TikTok last night and stumbled upon this adorable girl ranting and raving, like, so shocked, mind blown at the struggles Diana went through and the way it was, silenced and not talked about. So I definitely think that there's sort of like a modern cry for justice for Diana, a rehashed interest in the darker moments. And hopefully these conversations happening now will just help people. I think it could have helped people had more candid conversations gone on then. So the more things are talked about, the more we all can evolve. So another thing that's sort of interesting about this season is if this was happening today, when there are whispers of someone you look up to, someone in power, et cetera, having an affair or misbehaving, everyone takes to Twitter. That's just what happens. The power of social media is so different now. I mean, thoughts on these events probably are resonating with people in a different way now because they didn't have to deal with social media then. It was printed in the newspaper went in the trash, you move on.
Exactly. It's a totally different system for getting news and keeping updated on things like that now. And they, like you said, have probably great PR people. And there's just this whole organization that backs the royal family. So if things happen that didn't show them in a good light, then they would try to move on from it and people would forget. But they're just under such a tighter microscope now with social media. And so it makes sense that they turned off their Twitter comments because, like, you just can't escape it anymore, especially people who are now watching the show and just so many things involving your life are happening around you. It can get overwhelming. So I can definitely see why it's harder to be in the public eye. I mean, all celebrities deal with this, but anyone in power, a celebrity, a public figure like that, it just is 10 times harder for them this time around in this age of technology and media. So I definitely feel for them in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, social media has changed the game in so many ways. We were obviously talking about how there's been this sort of resurgence of interest in Diana. The actress who portrays her in The Crown does obviously a really, really incredible job. She's touched so many hearts. And Kristen Stewart is also going to be stepping into the role of Diana. She's going to be starring in the upcoming film Spencer. And I would just say, with all of the conversations being had right now, the timing of when The Crown came out, like, the pressure is clearly on. People, if you're going to do Diana, you better do her justice. And Kristen actually stopped by Jimmy Kimmel and they discussed the film a little bit. She opened up about how when she was young, she, remembers Diana's death. It's hard to not remember something from that moment because it was obviously such a huge tragedy that rocked the world. But Kristen was really young. So just like sort of a lot of younger people, she's learned after the fact more than lived through her life. And she said she fully understands the weight of her legacy and feels, quote, protective over her. She wants to make sure that she's portrayed in a good light. The film is actually going to just cover a weekend in the early 90s when Diana knew her marriage to Prince Charles wasn't working and that she needed to carve her own path. The movie is not going to be covering Diana's death. It's going to be focusing on like sort of the fraying of her relationship with Prince Charles and of course the love she had for her children. So a very interesting take. It's not completely different than what we saw in this season of The Crown. This is starting to be sort of a familiar narrative, but it will be really interesting to see them hone in on just like a 3-day window. Kristen talked about the plot and said,
I mean, everyone's perspective is different and there's no way to get anything right because of like what is fact in relation to personal experience.
Which I think is interesting because of course, no matter how many biographies you read, no matter how many times you watch The Crown, who people applaud for, being pretty historically accurate, you can't know exactly what went down at any given moment. She continued saying,
my movie takes place over like 3 days and it's this like really poetic internal imagining of what that might have felt like rather than giving like new information. So we kind of don't have a mark to hit. We just also love her.
So it seems like the main focus of this movie is to just sort of lean into the narrative and give Diana as much of, justice as they can. I just keep thinking about how this is such a huge role to take on, especially right now. And I really think the silver lining is Diana has a really important story, and the more people we can reach, the better. I mean, what are your thoughts about another Hollywood project taking on such an important figure in history?
I think it makes sense that they're doing that and making another movie about it because, like we've said, regarding the other topics, it's on people's minds right now and people are fascinated with the story and with Diana's life. And this is an interesting concept, like you said, just a couple days of her life and how that all unfolded. So I think it's going to really be about the emotions that she felt that day in her relationships and how things unfolded. And you know, it's a movie though, and it's a piece of art. So it's going to be subjective, like Kristen said. You know, I'm sure when it comes out, people are going to hate it or love it based on if it, you know, runs with the facts or if it's, you know, totally different than what we personally would have imagined happened with her or how she felt. But like she said, you truly never know. So I'm interested to see her rendition of it for sure. I think people were confused at first when Kristen Stewart was cast in this role since it's so huge. I do think they look similar. And I mean, I think she's an underrated actress, honestly, because I've loved her in, you know, most of the stuff that she's done. So I think this is going to be a great movie for her. And I'm excited to see how they portray her, you know, in comparison to The Crown and in comparison to other renditions of her life that we've seen.
Oh, totally. I think that I totally know what you're talking about. I remember it was like Kristen Stewart's been cast as Princess Diana, and there was kind of a lot of like, because Diana is a princess. She's extremely girly. She's always in little suits, whatever. And Kristen Stewart is edgy. She's had like such a unique career. We just saw her in like Charlie's Angels playing like a badass. So it's a different like role to step into. But at the end of the day, she's a talented actress. She's a chameleon. And I think that Diana, especially, this is going to be one of those where she's going to have an accent coach. She's going to be watching interviews. She's going to do everything in her power to get it as right as she can. So I agree with you. I think it'll be really interesting to see how the movie is received when it comes out and what they're able to do with the story. You guys, that is all of the updates we have for you on the Royals right now. We want to know your thoughts. Obviously, I'm sure all of your hearts go out to Meghan and Harry. Send them some love down in the comments. And on top of that, just in general, have you watched The Crown? Have you learned anything new? Are you going down the royal history rabbit hole? Let us know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, I'm your host, Fiona Zaring. You can follow me on socials at Fiona Zaring. Gabby, where can they find you?
You can follow me at Gabby Gonta.
Amazing. Thanks for watching, you guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.